If you say you know JWT authentication in .NET, but you are not able to answer this interview question, then you will fail the interview. In our Build With Me series, we have implemented JWT authentication for our Task Manager API, which we have built in the .NET Core. So today we are going to discuss the interview question related to authentication and authorization. If you went through our previous video of our Build With Me series, where we have implemented the authentication in our .NET Core API using JWT token, where we have created the endpoint for getting the JWT token and another endpoint for registering the user. In interview, interviewer is not going to ask you to write the code for this endpoint mostly, but they might be asked the question like, what is the difference between authentication and authorization? Why do you use JWT authentication? Because there are other options as well. So interviewer might be ask you why you prefer the JWT authentication. How does the token validation internally work? So in this video, we are going to discuss most probably 15 interview questions related to our Task Manager API, where we have implemented the authentication using JWT. So let's test your knowledge. Before that, I will recommend to just go through the previous video where we have implemented the authentication and authorization, then come back here and see the interview question you might be facing your interview. First question is, what is the difference between authentication and authorization? If I have to explain in real life, so authentication means entering in the building with your ID card. So what happened when we enter in any premises, we show our ID card and the security person is allowed to enter ourselves in the premises. So that is the authentication. Authorization is which room you are allowed to enter. So like as a developer, I am not allowed to enter in a server room. That is the allow only for the IT people. So that is the difference between the authentication and authorization. So in our API, our login and JWT token is validate the authentication, and the role-based access, that is the authorization. So when we give that particular role to the particular endpoint, like the admin only can access this endpoint, admin only can delete the task, that is the authorization. But I can fetch the detail, even I am the normal user. So that is the authentication. There is no user specific control for getting the data, but there is the user specific action for deleting the data. So you have to be admin to delete the data. So that is the authorization. Next question is, what is the token? JWT stand for JSON Web Token. So you can think JWT is like a digital pass entry. When user logged in, server validate the credential and send the JWT token. So the client will send this JWT token with each and every request to the server. So what happened? So server don't need to check every time the credential to the server, don't need to verify, because the user is sending the valid token with each request. So next question is, why do we use JWT token instead of session authentication? So if you are a experienced developer, so you must know that previously most of the companies developer use the session based authentication. But these days JWT authentication is one of the most popular way of the authentication. So the question is, why do we use the JWT authentication instead of the session based authentication? What is the advantage we will get using the JWT? So the answer is, session store the data on the server, but JWT token store the authentication detail, or you can say that the claim detail, the user identity detail inside the token itself. The advantage of this, the JWT token is the stateless. So when you send the JWT token with each request, so every time it consider as a new request, API don't need to remember anything. So the JWT token itself has the full detail, you can say. So that is the one advantage. It is the stateless. The second advantage is, it is the scalable for the microservice. And the third advantage is, it works very well with Angular, React or any mobile app application. It is very lightweight, easy to implement, and it is a secure if you compare with the session based authentication. So the next question is, what is the three part of JWT token? So JWT token has three sections basically. It has the header, it has payload, and the third part is the signature. So you can think it like a sealed courier package. Header contain what type of token is payload contain the user information, the authenticated user information like the username, user role. But remember one thing, token has never stored the password. So it has the user detail but it don't have the password because that is the not secure. The third part is the signature. So that is the security seal. So no one can tamper that your token basically. Question number 5. Where do you store your JWT token in your Angular side? So this is the very important question because interviewer now try to understand you are telling by your experience or you are just telling memorizing the answer. So the common option on the Angular side to storing the token is the you can store in the session storage, you can store in the local storage, or you can store in the HTTP only cookies, which is the most secure place to store your JWT token. In most beginner projects, people use local storage to store the token. But if you see the production ready application, so most of the people use HTTP only to store the token because that is the safest place on the client side to store the token. So next question is, what happened when user logged in? So here interviewer try to understand if you have actually implemented the JWT token in your application. And here you have to explain your application flow to the interviewer step by step. So the first part, so you can say like, user has to enter username and password and click on the login button. That is the front end part. So the request will go to the API and the API will validate the credential and API will send the response as a JWT token. So now the client has the JWT token. So now you have to store the JWT token in your storage like we discussed in the previous question in the HTTP only cookies or the local storage. And after that, whenever the user send any request to API, it has to send the JWT token in the header part as the authorization header. And that is the full flow of your application, how the user will interact with your Angular and the API. Okay, so next question is, how the ASP.NET Core validate the token. So again, if you went through the implementation video, so you must see the how we implemented the JWT authentication validation part. We have to the configure the detail in app setting. But here the interviewer try to understand if you actually understand how the exactly internally ASP.NET Core validate your token. You can say that ASP.NET Core use middleware to authenticate JWT token and then you can explain the step basically. So the first step is JWT token come in the authentication header, middleware validate the signature. If the validation pass, the request will be proceed further. And if the token is not valid token, then 401 unauthorized response will be sent to the client application. So next question is what is the claim in the JWT token? So claim basically store the user information like user ID, username, user email ID and the user role. These are the basic detail which come under the claim. So claim part of JWT token store this user info. Next is what is role-based authorization. So role-based authorization basically is, so you are not opening your API for everyone. So that is the authentication. But the specific user can do the specific thing in your API. That is the role-based authorization. So that is like admin can only delete your task. That is the authorization. Admin only can create the task. That is also the authorization. That is role-based decision. You can say that the role-based authorization. So next question is what is the JWT token expiration? So and why it is required? It is required because JWT token mostly when we generate the token we configure some time. Till what time? Like if I am generating the token right now, so after that 1 hour this token will be valid token. After that this token will be expired. The reason behind that is like if your token is compromised, if someone get your token, so it will be automatically expire after 1 hour and that person cannot reuse after 1 hour. So this reduce the risk to be hacked basically. And the next is what is the refresh token. This is the very important question because most of the developer know how to generate the token and what is the token and how it works, but they don't know what is the refresh token and how we are using it and what the option we have in the .NET Core for refreshing the token basically. So what is the refresh token? So we just discussed about the expiring the token. So suppose that if I am the user, I logged in the system and I am continuously using the application. But after 1 hour, because our token will be expired, I will be the logged out. But think in the point of view as a user. So if you are a continuous using the application and after some time the application make you logged out and throw out of the application, you will not feel that as a good experience, as a good user experience. So for resolving that issue, we have the mechanism called the refresh token. Token basically is help with that functionality. For resolving that issue, we have the mechanism called the refresh token. So refresh token always have the short life compared to the actual your JWT token. So when we generate the JWT token, that time also we send the refresh token from the API part. So basically whenever after 1 hour user token will expire, then the client will send the refresh token to the API and API will validate that refresh token. If that is the valid token, then API will generate new fresh JWT token. So it will help user to continuously use the application. So the next question might come to you as where did you store your password in your application? So never said that you store in your database, like you store as a plain text or something, because that will give the very wrong impression to the interviewer, and interviewer might be think that you don't aware about the security principle, or you don't aware about the good security things which we have to follow while developing the application. So you have to say that you use some encrypt the password basically, or hashing the password. So you can say that you use that and you encrypted the password and store in your database. That is also not very good practice, I would say. In the real application, most of the corporate application, actual applications, not store the password in the database, because if someone get the access of your database, then he can access your password as well. So that is not good practice. The good practice is like most of the company use right now the single sign-on, but that is the different part altogether. We might be make some more video on that. So let's continue with the interview question based on the authentication and authorization. Next question is, what is authentication middleware in ASP.NET Core Basics? So for that you have to understand first what is the middleware. If you know that, then you can explain very well, but I'm just explaining what is the authentication middleware. So middleware sit between your client, server and controller. Authentication middleware check your token before it reach to your API. Next question is, what is the difference between 401 and 403 status code? So the 401 status code basically said that the user is not authenticated user. So he cannot enter, he cannot trigger the API. And the 403 is basically for unauthorized user. So it says that user is authenticated, but he is not allowed to use that particular action method, particular endpoint which you are trying to access. For example, if a normal user is trying to access the delete task manager API, so he will get the 403 status code. Okay, so let's end this session here. So if you actually want to build authentication system from scratch using .NET Core and Angular, so you can watch my Build With Me series, how to implement the authentication and authorization video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe the channel. See you in the next video. Thank you so much.